Kia ora tātou, ngā mihi nui kia koutou katoa. Tūtei, ngā mihi nui kia koutou mai te Waipounamu, te whenua o ngā Crusaders. And if you can't tell, it is a beautiful, sunny, balmy day here. Looks like it's probably about 25 degrees outside and just getting hotter by the moment. So no need to feel jealous. Sitting beside me, I've got my three colleagues from Tokona Te Raki, and some of you might not know who Tokona Te Raki is. We're a very new company, I think 2.5 years in the making. We've got 27 staff. Our CEO is Dr. Edawera Tarena, and our one shareholder is Te Runanga o Ngaitahu. And I hear Edu describes us as part think tank, part do tank. And so we do quite a bit of research, and then we try and take that research and put it into action and make things happen. But we're going to say more about Tokona Te Raki a little bit further along the line. I think the first thing for us is to introduce ourselves and let you get to know us a little bit first. So, ko wai aho, ko Piripi Prendergast tapu ingoa, Ngāti Pākehā te iwi, and for me, I'm relatively new to working outside teaching. So for the bulk of my career, I've been a secondary teacher, but working primarily with bilingual programs, kura kaupapa, and so on. And I think in the audience is Diana Perry. And if you're there, Diana, you take me right back to the 1970s in Kawerau, teaching in those wonderful, wonderful days in that wonderful, wonderful town. So,
Nā koe, Piripi.
Diana, he tino mihi nui ki a koe. And the neat thing is, Diana, you and I, we have not changed. And
I know, it's amazing.
We started at a very, very young age teaching. So, yeah, it's just lovely to see you, Diana. So that's me. I'm going to pass down the line to my colleagues.
Kia ora koutou, my name is Kai Staples and I'm a mother of 2 boys from here in Ngaitahu.
Kia ora, I'm Gianni Paraku and I am from Invercargill.
Kia ora, ko Tony Kana tuku ingoa, no Waikato Tanuiaha. I'm one of the rangatahi interns alongside these two and our senior rangatahi, Piripi.
Sorry, apologies for passing the laptop along the line all the time, but you'll get used to it. And just perhaps a little bit of an explanation. One of the things we've done with our company, we believe that rangatahi are the solution. And so this year we've employed 9 rangatahi as future makers. And so they're with us for a year, full-time wage, and their job is to learn how to change the world. And that's very exciting. And then next year we'll bring another 10 in, 10 the year after, and so on. I want to introduce our kaupapa. So with Tokona Te Raki, streaming has been on our radar for probably 3 years now, since a visit to a high school in Wellington, where it just so happened I arrived on a day and went to see the Te Reo Māori teacher, and she said to me, "Oh, matua, taku aroha, but it's not a good day today. The Year 9 Māori students have been told what their class placements are, and close to half of them have been put into cabbage maths, and they are furious. They are absolutely ropeable about it." And so really from that moment on, streaming was on our radar. Last year, we published this report here, He Awa Ararau, which some of you may have seen, and that tracked the journeys of 70,000 rangatahi from school into the workforce. And that, again, identified streaming as a systemic barrier to Māori success. And perhaps before I go any further, there seems to be a great deal of confusion around what streaming is, and people are very unclear about it. In a nutshell, streaming is any form of ability grouping. So when you think of primary schools and how students are put into the top group for reading or bottom group for maths and so on, that's streaming. If you think of secondary schools with banding, you've got the extension class, the middle band classes, and then you have the foundation class. And teachers call it foundation class. The students call it the cabbage class, the veggie class. And I'm going to use that word because that's the word that they use. And it is confronting. But that definition of streaming is really just getting broader. And the principal of Hortowhenua College in a Gazette article in March, he also talked about the use of prerequisites at senior secondary school as being a prerequisite, where you can't do level 2 algebra unless you achieved something, you know, NCA level 1 and so on. And the other one, only a couple of weeks ago, I had a careers advisor, careers teacher come up to me and said, you know, when you're talking about streaming, you need to include the career advisors in this, because there's a practice, or there's a stereotype, particularly when Māori boys, Pacifica boys come, and they're stereotyped and they're being told, oh, you know, you'll be good with your hands. You should go and have a career in the trades. I'll help you get into the trades. And, you know, that's another form of steering in terms of careers. But for me, how I see it is streaming really is where the teacher is making decisions about the student's ability and enacting on that. So the teacher is saying, you can or you can't, and in all its various forms. Gosh, the second thing about streaming is that, one, it has a big whakapapa. And there'll be some people in the audience today who've heard Hannah O'Regan talk about the whakapapa of streaming. And I know she goes back, I think even prior to 1862, and how the Ministry of Education, the government, made a deliberate decision that the education for Māori was designed for Māori to become manual labourers. And that's carried through, you know, we talk about the 1960s with assimilation, again, trade training schemes for Māori. And yeah, just as an aside, there was a lot of good things done with the trade training in the 60s, but once I heard Tohu Pōtiki, who was a well-known Ngāi Tohu leader, say the real shame was that there was no university strand to it. They didn't have a strand where you could perhaps go off and do carpentry during the day, but go off also to university. So streaming has a big whakapapa behind it, and it's based on stereotypes, it's based on bias, it's based on racism. It's a racist practice, a systemic racist practice that we have in our system, but which we seem very much blind to. So the next little section we're going to cover, we're going to look at the impacts. What are the impacts of streaming? Because I think, you know, it's like two sets of glasses for teachers. You know, that honest belief that by having streaming, we're doing the very best for our students. But we've been gathering student voice all across the country, and for students, they're seeing it through a totally different set of glasses. So I'm going to hand over to my colleagues to talk about the impact.
Kia ora. So I was personally streamed into the lower or cabbage classes at school, and I stayed at high school for the 5 years, but I left without the 3 levels of NCA. This was because I was streamed and I had less resources and I didn't have as the best teachers caring about my progress. This impacted my mental health and mana, therefore ruined any kind of positive relationship with the education system. And now that I have tamariki and see them being streamed into the lower reading groups, I've witnessed the spark in his eyes dissipate when he's not at the same level as his mates, and I can feel the effect that it's having on his well-being already. This is not an experience I want for my kids or any of the tamariki across Aotearoa.
Kia ora. So as also off of Kaya here is that I've also been put through the education system, and just one impact that inflicted on me personally, it was from in primary school being placed in a low end reading group, or the lower end of the classroom, now that I'm here at Tokona, I gained a bigger concept of what this looked like, and it consisted of more of an unconscious impact towards myself and my future. So by me being in a classroom with a lower resources and whatnot, that built up a foundation for me to not have a good relationship with my teacher, and then not having a good relationship with my teacher makes me want to not go to school, and if I don't go to school, I'm not going to get an education. So I see that streaming is more of it's also what you can see, and then also what you can't see impacts a lot to a young person's life, essentially. So.
Kia ora, yeah, just so like Kai and Gianni, I'd also been streamed through school. In high school, I was placed into one of the cabbage classes, and we were known throughout the school pretty infamously as the worst class, or the hardest class to manage. And it was funny because when I walked in, it was a majority of the students were brown, either Māori or Pacific Islander. We were all in one class, which I thought was cool at the time, but alongside us there were about 5 students who were pretty much on the watch list for being expelled. So they caused a lot of disruption within the class, again, making the rest of the class act up. And a lot of teachers kind of had a hard time really trying to manage us all together. And with that, it led me on to, from then on, I was pretty much in the same bracket, and we moved through each subject. Obviously, a lot more teachers hating us, didn't want to teach us, our classes were harder to finish. And then that ended up affecting my entry into university because I didn't have I got UE, but I didn't have certain subjects to get into Auckland University, which is what I could have done if I had a better science class from then on, or any other prerequisites. And then on the other side of that, I had my partner who was actually streamed. She went to another school and she was streamed into the highest class, and she got some unreal opportunities that I'd never even heard of, or like just extra teaching that would have helped me out a lot. And but the thing is that impacted her mental health. She ended up with pretty bad anxiety throughout high school, just trying to keep up that level and holding that burden, that tokenism, if you will. Yeah, kia ora. Back to Piripi.
Oh, kia ora, no. Just following on from what Tony was saying, that we know there's a wealth of research out there about about the impacts of streaming on students, and those students who get put in the top classes, the research shows that they get more teacher time, more challenging work, more warm fuzzies and encouragement, higher expectations. And just leading on from what Tony was saying, when you're in the bottom group, you get exactly the opposite. And I was going to also mention something about the selection, how those classes are chosen. And I've dug sort of quite deeply into the data, particularly around where they're streamed on PAT tests and things. And there seems to be no correlation between the scores and the class placements. And so I've seen where you get Māori students who in Stay 9 Force A, and they're in the cabbage class, but you get non-Māori students who are in Stay 9 1 that are in the middle band. And Tony also talked about the extension classes, and when we've interviewed Māori students who've been put into those, there's sort of mixed message. One is that feeling, wow, I'm in this class, it's a great accolade, but there's all sorts of problems with peer groups. So peer groups rejecting you, not being able to then go, the timetable doesn't allow you to go to kapa haka practice, and anxiety. Tony's just brought up around anxiety, and that's not just for Māori, that's right across the board. You're on a competitive model, you've got to compete to hold your seat. And so, yeah, the extension classes themselves have got some real complications around them. And gosh, I was also going to mention, I should have done this earlier. Quite a few of you will have seen this report. We put this out in April, and it looks at the impacts of streaming on students, but it also follows 4 case studies of schools that have stopped streaming and looks at the results of that. I don't want to go into detail because I think we posted copies out to every school in New Zealand, and so most people should have seen this by now. All these things are available on our website, by the way. Just Google Māori, Māori Futures Collective, Tokona Te Raki. And the last thing I was going to mention is the Minister of Education himself was on the hui late last year, and he said, you know, the Education Department, Ministry of Education, the policy is that schools should not stream. You know, he said there's a wealth of evidence and research that shows that streaming is bad, and he acknowledged that for Māori and Pacific in particular, streaming is incredibly damaging. So that's coming from his mouth, and he's saying that. Unfortunately for the ministry, while that might be the policy, you know, that hasn't been enacted, and because we have self-managing schools, schools have gone in a different direction. I'll come back to that in a little while. Just checking what I was going to say.
So, kia ora, Piripi. Shall we?
We're almost breakout, I think, Chris, are we?
Yeah, I was just wondering if this is a good place to pause. Do you think? Is that?
Yeah, I was perhaps just mentioned that. Yeah, and I think teachers believe they're doing the right thing, but there is strong resistance within schools to stopping streaming, to ending streaming. And there's also parents, there's a strong group of parents, particularly those parents whose children are in extension classes who want to keep that system. And those parents have a lot of power. And in the case studies, almost every case study had examples of where parents have said to the principal, if you get rid of streaming, we're putting on buses, our kids will go to the neighbouring school. And that's a very powerful threat. But I think what's more worrying is teachers who you know, are not looking at the evidence, but are going by their own judgment and saying streaming is the bee's knees, it's staying. You know, I will fight to the death to keep it, and it's turning into quite a divisive issue in school staff rooms. I started off by saying that Tokona Te Raki is part think tank, part do tank, and in terms of the streaming, yeah, we've been gathering insights, student voice, you know, getting the hard data and so on. And now we're at the stage where we have to do something about this. And we've put our hand up and we've said, you know, we are opposed to streaming. We want this systemic barrier to Māori success gone. And incidentally, you know, the evidence points that everybody benefits. And again, our case studies showed this, that everybody seemed to be a winner when streaming was gone. So we've put our hand up and said, we're going to take action to end streaming. The Ministry of Education have been really good and they've backed us. They've come down to meet with us early in the year. And the Iwi Leaders Forum has done exactly the same. And they said, we've already passed a remit against streaming. We've taken that to the ministry and now we're backing you to take the action and to lead on this. And we support you wholeheartedly. So we've had a lot happening in the last 2 months in particular. And I'm going to pass over to my colleagues who are going to give you a bit of a rundown on what's been going on.
Kia ora anō. So at Tokona, we've got a petition going, which is we're trying to get up to 5,000 signatures to kind of put pressure and call on the government to make a change to streaming. So far, we've got about 2,700 signatures. So we just need a few more to finish that up. We also went to the Careers Expo here in Christchurch, across the road from us at Horncastle Arena. And we had the students there fill out a survey and participate in a basketball game where where they would stand at the hoop and then would ask some questions relating to streaming. And would say if you take a step forward if you've been streamed, take a step forward if whatever. So the further they got from the hoop, the more they'd been streamed and affected by it. And then at the end of it, we say, okay, turn around, now try and take your shot. And at the end of it, there were kids right under the hoop who could just pretty much dunk it, put it straight in. And there were kids at the end of the line who just had no chance whatsoever. So they kind of put the perspective in there for them, which was awesome for us to see. And then we also did a bit of a survey for them to fill out, which we got a bunch of data from. So 60% of the students, 64%, there were about 100 there that we surveyed, 64% felt that they had been streamed. 98% of them felt that streaming should be talked about more in their schools. And then 38% of the rangatahi did not want to attend school due to streaming. So we thought that was pretty tough to hear and pretty disheartening, really. And then finally, we've also got the New Zealand artist and rapper Sid Diamond has actually written a song called Don't Run, which he's done through Tau FM, I believe. Yeah, so we've sorted that out. And a lot of other artists are getting on board that, which is awesome to hear, such as Stan Walker and Sons of Zion. So it's good that they're trying to get the message out. So I'll pass it along to...
Kia ora. So we had a Leaderssui. We had 55 people attend, leaders attend from 22 organisations, from Teachers Union, universities, Aero and principals. This was a great success to have all these leaders in the one hui and on board the Destreaming kaupapa. We had amazing kai catered from my whānau from Onuku on the day, and I was privileged to be present as a rangatahi voice also. We want rangatahi to be inspired by their future and to be thriving in their education, confident in their culture and determining their own paths. Streaming is a barrier to this vision and it needs to end. Here at Tokona Te Raki, we're uniquely positioned to champion this important kaupapa. However, we cannot do it alone, and to be successful, we invite you on board the waka to embark this journey with us.
So being in mind with our kaupapa as well is that we do truly believe that rangatahi are our future, and we know that's really important to us. So what we are going to do in the near future is that we're going to be hosting in our space here in Christchurch a hui consisted of young rangatahi through high schools around the country, to invite them to come down and to collaborate and talk about the streaming that is happening, and how can we get some initiatives going to actually implement into our system straight from the Futures Initiative of what they will be living in and then dealing on with for future generations and whatnot. So yeah, kia ora.
You've heard mention of the Leaderssui, which took place 2 weeks ago, and that was a really big thing because we've been doing a systems analysis, trying to figure out how it is that streaming is sustained. And part of that is organisations generally don't have a policy. If they do, they don't enact that policy. People turn a blind eye to streaming, and there's even, I think there's a shift of blame. People can see things aren't working, but they shift the blame onto rangatahi and to whānau, which just exacerbates the problem. You know, we said we don't have data, but it was neat. And we don't work collaboratively. Everybody's in a silo. And so it was neat to invite the leaders of these organisations, and even more neat that we had such a wonderful turnout. You know, Kai and Gianni and Tony have mentioned some of the names of organisations. We had all the teachers' unions, the principals' federations, teaching council. We had 2 of the teachers' colleges of education. Gosh, race relations, Meng Foon came. It was funny with Meng Foon because we hadn't even sent the invitations out, and he replied 3 times or emailed us 3 times to say he was coming. So it was a big boost to have so many people and so many organisations represented. Since then, the Human Rights Commission is on board, and there's another one. Oh, Māori Principals Federation has joined. So out of that, they left that hui with a call to action, and it's requiring them to come up with specific actions that they will take, working collaboratively together to end streaming. And that's July the 8th is when they've got to reply to that. But already we're getting replies in. One of the key parts is the call to set up a design team, a brains trust, a group of dedicated thinkers who've got an understanding of the issues, who come up with a blueprint, a plan to go ahead. And you know, just today I've had an organisation contact me to say that one of their top leaders is probably going to come on this design team, and hopefully we can have that up and running late July. And so we start to, out of that will come a coordinated plan of action to make this change. So that's what we're doing here. We're also talking about other research that's needed. Is it around primary schools? How do we help teachers to make this big change in the way they teach in their pedagogy? How do we help them to understand what the issues are? And I think we've got to fundamentally come back to it. It is a racist system that has been designed, with that in mind. We might have forgotten the whakapapa, but I sometimes hear teachers say, look, I'm too busy to change. I don't have time to do this. I don't have the training to do this. Well, you're then excusing colluding with a racist system, and it's not good enough. There's a better way. We've shown in our little book, some inklings that there is a better way, and we actually need some research around teachers, and we need to try and understand teachers who are resisting it, and how we can work alongside them. We don't want to ostracize people. We want to bring people collectively on board. One question, there's a very good question there about MOE. Why aren't they taking action? And I can't answer for them, but they've approached us, and they know that streaming is not, it's got to go. And I guess perhaps they're relying on us to do it as a collaborative, or to build a collaborative movement. And maybe that's something that they're thinking, well, they've got such a vested interest, and sometimes there's competition or clashes between individual schools and the ministry, and maybe it's better to have us in the middle. And we also occupy that treaty space. Behind us is iwi, in front of us is the Crown, so we've got that unique space. I know we're getting, time started to disappear, and I was just going to say a couple of quick things. One, if you go on our website, you'll find resources, particularly illustrations that you can print off to go up in the staff room. And we're just starting to work on some illustrations around the systems analysis. How do we sustain it? How do we change it? What underpins streaming? What are the values? And I know Pam Connell from Core Education is on, and they've been doing a wonderful job creating resources around, particularly around having those conversations in the staff room. And if you go on the Core website, you'll find links to those resources. They're only literally, I think, 1 week old. And I'll just come back to it. The final thing from me would be that we have to do this as a collaborative movement. We've all got to work together. And for us, really, we're the backbone organisation, and our role is particularly around the communicator. And so we want to know what you're thinking, what your experiences are. We want to gather the information and then share it. And so please don't hesitate to make contact with us and to come on board and just signal your support. And together we can do this.